like to go ahead and turn it over to Sophia Liu, the co-chair of the steering committee for the Federal Citizen Crowdsourcing and Citizen Science community. Over to you, Sophia.
Hello, thank you so much. I welcome you all to this webinar being hosted by Digitalgov and OSTP. I think this is exciting that there'll be a new kind of approach to this data collection effort. And we have some new folks from OSTP that's been helping, as well as Stippy. So I'd love to introduce you to Grace Diana. She's been great in kind of helping to facilitate that coordination of this FY 19 and 20 biennial report on prizes and citizen science. I think this new approach might be a way in which we can more efficiently approach the reporting that we did compared to the last one, which was our first report as well for citizen science. So I think that was an initial first step baseline, but excited to have Grace talk more about what they've been working on and sort of the direction for this year's or this biennial report. And so I don't want to spend too much time. I just want to give the opportunity to have her speak. And I look forward to our FedCCS August meeting later today at 2 to sort of have a more open discussion and follow up to our webinar today. So thank you for the opportunity for you guys to facilitate this webinar so that we can continue the conversation and get the data collection moving forward as it's launched.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sophia. And hello, everyone. Really excited to be here on the webinar with you today. This is an extremely exciting project, as you all know, and some of you that are veterans in this project have been working on it for a number of years. And so really thank you again for joining. For those of you that I have not met, I know it's been a while since we have connected, but like Sophia mentioned, my name is Grace. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of the NSTC at the Office of Science and Technology Policy at the White House, and the lead for open innovation. And so just a big welcome to all of you. Really, just so that you get to know your team, Jara is obviously on the line. Stippy will be taking over just right after these quick introductions to walk you through the slide deck and what you can be expecting through the course of this short webinar. So as you all know, this activity is extremely important, and we know that crowdsourcing and citizen science helps this nation innovate. Director Drogemeyer, who is the director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy, understands the importance of prize competitions, challenges, crowdsourcing, and citizen science, and recognizes the great work that has been done over the last reporting period, and then also especially the amazing work that has been done to address COVID-19. So really, to get back down to the basics, why do we need to make a special report? So we want to report to Congress all the incredible work that is being done, as well as share valuable lessons with the greater community of practice. This effort will make all the work more accessible and distilled so that you can read quickly and find relevance in past projects, and then also tailor it to potential future objectives and map new projects for future challenges and opportunities. So I will actually just turn this right back over to Stippy. They have a couple of reminders for you all. And just as a reminder, just so that I can say this, all submissions are due November 20th of 2020. So that's hopefully an easy date to remember. And just as a reminder, the final report will become public. So please ensure that all submissions receive full agency clearance. So I will turn it back over to Stippy. Thanks so much, everyone.
Hey, thank you for that, Grace. My name is Gifford Wong. I'm one of the team members from the Science and Technology Policy Institute, or Stippy. And there are a couple of members on the team here on this call as well, Andrew and Luke. But we are a team that's really looking forward to working with Grace at OSTP, Jara and Sophia, the communities of practice, to get this report going. As a quick reminder before I give it over to Tom, just to remind folks that this event is for federal employees only. We want to make this as an open discussion as possible for this data call. And because as you could tell, there's a lot of excitement for moving with being able to share rather with Congress, like all the great activities that you all are doing. But without further ado, I'll hand it over to Tom, who will sort of walk through a little bit about the new look of our survey, as Sophia alluded to, as well as actually we'll have a little bit of a live demo before, and then as Jared pointed out, we'll have some Q&A sprinkled throughout. Go ahead, Tom.
Thanks, Gif. Okay, so I'm going to add a couple of little housekeeping points and then give you an idea of where we'll take this. So the first thing is, for those of you who are not familiar with the Science and Technology Policy Institute, we are a federally funded research and development center, an FFRDC, that was initially established by Congress in order to provide support to OSTP and NSTC, and as well other federal agencies. So although we ourselves are not federal employees, we work exclusively with the federal government. So that's just so you know a little bit about how we've gotten involved with this. Just as a reminder, we have our schedule. So the schedule for the webinar is until 12:30. I don't plan to talk that long, but based on our prizes and competitions webinar a couple days ago, that should leave us ample time for lots of questions. If you have any questions as they come to mind, please just post them in the chat room. GIF will help handle those, process them, and I will be stopping as we go to sort of take any questions on the fly and hopefully give you satisfaction for those questions as we go through. Okay, so the plan here is I have a handful of slides to present to you, and then we'll be jumping to the web page. As I'll tell you in a second, that's the big change from last year. So those of you who have gone through this process before, we spent quite a bit of time thinking about what worked, what didn't, what made sense, what didn't, and try to improve the process for everybody, both for those of you who are providing information for the report, and also to help us organize it so that we have a clearer, better, more straightforward, and as approachable a document as absolutely possible. So I'm going to start off with this slide, just a reminder, what needs to be reported to us. So any crowdsourcing or citizen science activity that was carried out under the authority of the Crowdsourcing and Citizen Science Act by law must be included in this biennial report. I'm going to remind you that that act has some very specific language, and in fact there are some questions that will arise that based on past years experience can be a little bit ambiguous, but oftentimes those words are specifically what is actually asked in the legislation. So we've tried to make that as clear as possible, but you know, there's only so much you can do when Congress has put words on paper and everything is passed into law. So those are the only things that you're required to report, the ones that were authorized by that act. However, agencies are highly encouraged to report any crowdsourcing and citizen science activities that they carry out under other authorities. There are numerous authorities, some of them are agency specific, and the reason for that is it's really your opportunity to highlight the activities of your agency. A lot of time and effort and resources go into many of these activities, into pretty much all of these activities, and this is the opportunity to bring it into, you know, to highlight it for the public and for policymakers. So what shouldn't you include? Only crowdsourcing and citizen science activities that your agency oversaw and effectively ran. The many agencies in the federal government support crowdsourcing and citizen science activities, for example, through grants assigned to other principals at academic institutions, at nonprofits, However, if your agency or office did not actually have any direct involvement in designing and carrying out the activity, please do not report it. If you have any questions about whether it should be reported or not, please reach out to us. We'll get you straightened out. But we are not able to include activities that were supported with federal dollars, but were not directly overseen by federal agencies. Lastly, I'm going to remind you that what you submit will be used to create a report that is delivered to Congress. So what you submit should be as complete as possible, and think about what the audience is in terms of policymakers who may not be familiar exactly with what you have done, many of whom are enthusiastic to learn more, and exactly how you word things. And although Grace has already done it for us, it never hurts to remind people as many times as possible. The due date for all submissions this year is the 20th of November, 2020. That means that those submissions must be cleared by whatever internal agency process that you have to get all this taken care of. We'll come back to exactly how to submit these things when I go through the website. But keep in mind to leave a little bit of time to make sure that you get all of that leadership approval. So I will note one thing here. This date is actually a change from the previous time that we've done this. In previous years for prizes and competitions, as well as for crowdsourcing and citizen science, the date was typically sometime in early October, and there were two challenges that emerged from that date, both stemming from basically the same reason. The date was very close to the transition between fiscal years. And one, that means that agencies are oftentimes preoccupied with a lot of other critical responsibilities that are tied to the end of one fiscal year and the beginning of another. So it was not unusual for people to request extensions and just not have enough time to fill out the information survey that we sent out. The other thing is that because the fiscal year had just ended, many agencies didn't have final numbers for some of the budget questions in the survey. And so again, it didn't make much sense to try to force the issue and then have all the numbers revised. Based on past experience, virtually all information came in by mid-November. And so we thought it best to just simply move the due date. The consequence of this, of course, is that there is less leeway afterwards for making changes. So please be aware that once things are submitted, there will be opportunity for you to review the report and for your agency to clear the final report, but there will be limited opportunity to add new submissions and to make substantial changes on the fly. So I just wanted to flag that as a change from previous years. All right. So in addition to the later deadline, for those of you who have gone through this process before, there has been a substantial redesign in how we've done this. And the biggest change is simple. We're going online. If you've done this previously, you'll remember that last time we had to send out a sort of a form in either Microsoft Word or PDF that people would fill in and then email back to us. This time, you'll be doing it through your browser, and we've tried to automate the process as much as possible. I'll flag a couple of benefits from, or hope for benefits from this process as we go through. The way this will work, however, because it's now online, is every agency point of contact for every crowdsourcing and citizen science activity will receive an individualized link that's tied specifically to a single activity. Those links are shareable they're shareable within an agency, but the link will only work for that particular crowdsourcing or citizen science activity. You can't use it to modify or update any other activities. if you are the point of contact for a crowdsourcing and citizen science activity and you have not received a link by early next week, please contact us at citizenscience@ida.org. The email address is right on the bottom. It appears in multiple places in the online survey. If you have any questions, if you run into any obstacles, this is the first place to turn. So in any case, if early next week you think that you should be notified for a crowdsourcing and citizen science activity, and you have not been, let us know as soon as possible, and we will do what we need to set you up. Okay, so what do I have next here? Okay, this is the last slide that I'll be dealing with. My goal from here on in for the webinar is to basically walk you through what you'll be seeing and the process you'll be going through to enter any information. This slide will cover some basic information just sort of to prepare you for that. Before I continue, at this point, are there any questions that people need to feel that they need to have addressed?
Yeah, Tom, couple questions have come in, and again, really appreciate folks sort of like using the chat box. It's been really helpful. So there's a question, this is maybe related to agencies that fund, so they don't themselves get to conduct. And so as Tom had pointed out, we will send links based off of the activities. If you are, say, an agency coordinator and still fall and can fall under the stipulation Tom brought out earlier, where you help facilitate or manage activities just under another authority, then reach out to us and we'll send you a URL. Unfortunately, as he pointed out, we're unable to document those grants or basically CCS activities that are not managed by your agency. And then another question.
Wait. So this is Ellen. So for me, this is a kind of a yes or no question. Should I expect a link or should I request the link? I'm at NSF, so we conduct none.
So then I guess no, if you're looking for a yes or no.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate the other, but I also just needed the final. Thank you.
Yeah, the final is then no. Okay, another question had come in saying, you know, how do we know who the project leads are? This person is an agency coordinator. How can they know who has received the link? This is a great question, and it actually echoes a lot of questions that we've received even in the other community. The project leads were identified either by on the website, CitizenScience.gov, or in the previous report, the report that reported on FY 17-18 activities. Those are how we initially identified project leads. Agency coordinators, though, when those project leads were communicated with, may have been alerted, and some of them had reached out to us already saying, hey, I'm the agency coordinator, I would like to perhaps have more insight or visibility into this process. And so we are working with agencies. Again, there's a diversity of folks within this community. So if you're someone, especially if you're like an agency coordinator and you're looking to have more visibility into this process, you can reach out to us, especially if, say, you coordinate a handful or more activities. There are some folks that coordinate upwards of many dozen, you know, and we can work out a way to make that fit. But as Tom will alluded to earlier, and he'll point out as he goes through these slides, there is a clearance process that this survey will sort of advocates for, so that no project lead or POC, if you will, should submit this without going through the clearance process, which would include you. So if that's helpful at all. And then if your project is not listed on CitizenScience.gov, then that's where you can reach out to us directly. CitizenScience@ida.org almost sounds like a telethon, like, telephone number, but reach out to us at CitizenScience@ida.org, and you can let us know of the projects that you would like URLs for. And if you would prefer to have the POCs fill those out, you can include their email addresses as well. And then last question before I let Tom go on, I certainly don't want to take up your time. There was a point in an earlier slide that had said about links being shareable. I think Tom had mentioned that. So the question is it possible for one person to start it and another person to finish it using the same link, or does it remember the computer's IP address? So what Tom was sort of alluding to, we certainly advocate that one person fill out this front to back. And you'll sort of see why, because this survey will employ what's called display logic and skip logic. But yes, it is certainly possible for one person to start it. So say Tom and I were co-filler outers of a survey, and then I would just email him saying, all right, I've gotten as far as I can. You can jump into the URL, then Tom can use the same link, complete the survey. But again, the survey will still advocate for that clearance process. And Tom could overwrite the things that I initially input. But to the question that was posed, the links are shareable in that regard. Okay, go ahead, Tom.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'll come back to that and we'll have a chance to see a little bit of how the process works and where the links take you. Before I jump online to the live web survey, just a handful of things for you to remember. So first things first, one of the things about online surveys is you never know what's coming next and you never know how far you're through it unless someone tells you. So number one, we have a PDF that we are making available of literally every question in the survey. So you can preview exactly the information that, the complete set of information that is relevant to any of these projects. In particular, for questions where you may need to either prepare text, say some of the questions are 200 to 300 word blurbs, we strongly recommend that you prepare those answers in a text editor or word processor and then simply cut and paste them into the survey rather than try to compose them as on the fly. There are also questions about partners and budgets and FTE hours and things like that that you may not have at your fingertips. So if you go through that PDF, you'll be able to figure out what information you need to gather so that you can have it at the ready. That brings me to my second point. Second point is you do absolutely not need to complete the survey in one single sitting. Using the individualized link, if you can only fill out part of the survey or only some of the questions, you can return to where you stopped using the same link. The software will remember your previous answers and submissions, and so you should just be able to continue essentially at your convenience. Third thing I'd like to point out is that there is no special button or separate process for your agency leadership to indicate that the submission has been cleared. Basically, when you finish submitting all the information, there will be an opportunity for you to save that information in a PDF document that you can then circulate for clearance and make any subsequent adjustments to the survey through online that you get from your agency. There is no separate process, so that when you hit the final submit button and all of the information is uploaded to us and it is no longer changeable, we are taking you at your word that you have in fact gotten that clearance. Please do so, because it turns out once something has reached final submission, it takes some time and some extra steps if any further revisions absolutely need to be made. So we would like to avoid that, both because it's a hassle to you and because frankly it's a hassle to us. All right. So as Gif alluded to, the survey uses what is called display or skip logic. And what this is basically is that when we sent out the survey in the previous version for this report, you got every possible question that applied to any possible crowdsourcing and citizen science activity. However, many people found questions that were not relevant to their activity, and there was some ambiguity as to whether they should answer them, how they should answer them, and I think that's pretty reasonable. If it doesn't make sense, what do you provide? One of the advantages of going to an online format is that if you answer a previous question that indicates that subsequent questions are not relevant, they simply won't be presented to you. And that's what we mean by display or skip logic, which means that depending on how you answer questions, if you're answering a survey for more than one activity, if you're filling out a survey for more than one activity, you may see slightly different questions. You also, if you are comparing the survey online to the PDF, you may not see certain questions because a previous answer indicated that that question is not relevant to your activity. Lastly, and I will point this out when we are live, but I think it's definitely something that is sort of a helpful feature for this whole thing. Like many surveys, and especially well-designed surveys, there's a bar at the top of each page that indicates your approximate progress. So you'll have an idea of whether you've just started or whether you are nearing the end at each page that you go through. All right, so that's the basic ground rules. It's going to take me a second or two to transfer over to my web browser. So I think if it's okay, this is also an opportunity to address any more questions that anybody may have submitted.
Yeah, so one question has come in, but it might be easier to answer after you roll through a little bit more of the PowerPoint. So I'll hold that, but that's really, yeah, no questions in the interim so far.
Okay, thank you. In that case, so you are the point of contact for a crowdsourcing and citizen science activity. We have sent you your customized, individualized link for your activity. When you hit that link, you will see a page that looks like this. This is the cover page for the survey, and most of it is pretty standard boilerplate explaining what the survey is, what the legislation is, the stuff that we covered a little bit earlier, but just always as a touch point and reference and reminder. The one thing that you should look for when you hit this first page is this. My dummy example here is called the Olive Oil Citizen Science Taste Test. You will not see this. You will see the name for your crowdsourcing or citizen science activity. Please double check this. If it's not the right name, if it's a name for another activity, or there is an issue that the name is incorrect in any way, please reach out to us and we will help get it straightened out. We'll either correct the name or we will get you the link to the correct activity. The name of your activity will appear at the top of most of the web pages as you go through. So you will, if you ever sort of get to that point where, wait a moment, which one am I doing? Just check the top of the page and you can confirm whether you are at the right place with the right link. Okay, in addition to, there's of course the reminder here of the final due date. You'll see that again. Required reporting information, and down here at the bottom we have a handful of definitions that we got questions for in previous years. So exactly what, based on the legislation, what counts as a citizen science activity, what counts as a crowdsourcing activity, what you should count as a participant when we ask about participants, and what we mean in this specific context with respect to FTE or full-time equivalent. basically, just standard information, nothing to answer. When you get to the bottom of a page, you'll see the blue button that says next page. You hit the button and it takes you, as the name implies, to the next page. And so this is the first page where you are asked to provide basic information. And in this case, it's really basic, straightforward, fundamental information about the activity. You'll notice, again, there's the name of my activity. This will change. It will be your activity. Since we already have the name, we don't need to ask about that. The first question asks about whether you have a web link. You may or may not. If you don't, just please put in not applicable or NA. The next question is a sort of short thumbnail sketch of exactly what your activity was about. I'll come back to this in just a second. And then the rest of this page consists of various multiple choice questions and radio buttons and pull down menus. And so this is actually a good page to start on. The content's very straightforward and descriptive, but it also pretty much displays the full variety of different ways that information will be collected throughout the survey. So let me just point those out and what to expect. So first of all, there are checkboxes like these. So this question here asks me the status of the olive oil CitizenScience taste test challenge during FY19. In FY19, it was launched. These checkboxes, you can actually have multiple answers, and you will oftentimes see, so what was the objective of your crowdsourcing science activity? You may have had multiple objectives. You can choose multiple objectives. In this case, I'm just going to choose launched. Next year is FY 2020, and it has been completed. Because this is a 2-year report, if your activity was not active in one or the other fiscal year, just hit that button and it's fine. I will come back to the radio buttons. The radio buttons are a little bit different because they only give you one possible choice. Otherwise, they pretty much look the same, and I feel like people have at this point in the 21st century mastered how to click buttons online. Next source of information, a number of questions have answers with pull down menus. So for example, asking which agency is the sponsoring agency for this activity. In this case, rather than have you type it in, you click this and you get to fill it in. I'm going to go with the Department of Energy for this. Then within the Department of Energy is very large, very diverse. So within the Department of Energy, there are multiple offices or other components. So you get to choose that. Let's say that energy programs, because it's olive oil and everyone knows how much energy olive oil gives you. Within that office or component, you may also have the opportunity to have an extra refinement. At this level, you type things in. Now, here's an example of what I meant by display or skip logic. So you notice that this pull-down menu only has offices or components that are relevant to the Department of Energy. If I change my department, say to the Department of Commerce, I again have a list of offices and components, but they are specific for the Department of Commerce. And we put this in so that there is no ambiguity about the name of agencies, no spelling variations, things like that. But it's also, the skip logic allows you not to have to go through every last component of every agency in the entire federal government. And it's still not a short list, but it's better than the thousands that would be the other option. Lastly, there are a number of questions that require answers to be put into text boxes. So this is the first such text box. We provide an estimate of the number of words. So just so you know, it's an idiosyncrasy of the software used to develop the survey that in fact, it doesn't count words, it counts characters. So there's sort of a standard conversion. This 300 words is approximately 300 words. The information that you will be given is the number of characters remaining. It's just the way it works. We decided that in the sort of the questions, a larger number of people seem to have an intuition about what 300 words consists of rather than the equivalent number of characters. Okay, so I am going to highlight this particular question. I would argue that this is perhaps the single most interesting and important question in the entire survey, because this 300 words is your opportunity to communicate to the public and to policymakers what was cool, fun, and exciting and awesome about your crowdsourcing and citizen science activity. Who it reached out to, what it accomplished, how it served the agency. And those aren't ands. Those are some of the kinds of topics that you can address here. One of the things to think about this box is if this box was to be pulled out as a separate kind of text box or social media announcement, what would you like to see? What would you like people to know about your crowdsourcing and citizen science activity? This is the place to put that. There's plenty of other interesting stuff to talk about, but if nothing else, this is your opportunity to provide that summary. Now, I am going to clear this box, and there's a reason why. This is a required answer. And when I've finished answering all the questions on a page, I hit next page. If, for whatever reason, I have not provided an appropriate answer, in other words, I've left a required question blank, or I have, for whatever reason, entered information that is not in the correct format, you will not be, or I will not be allowed to continue to the next page. You will be blocked if you end up with this situation. So for example, by leaving this text box blank, it's highlighted blue, and there's a red message here that says, please limit the response to 2,000 characters. This indicates that this is a required question, and I will not be allowed to proceed until this information is provided. So I'm going to put my answer back in. That should satisfy the presence of text, and I hit the next page, and boom, I'm on the next page, ready for the next question. This page is very straightforward. A very simple little text answer. I'm going to answer. So I should point out, when you hit these questions, they will all be blank when you start. I have had to fill this out with every question has a dummy answer, because the last thing you want to see me do is try to actually fill this thing out in real time. And so I can also get to the end of this quickly without having to fill out every page. So all of that is already taken care of. So this next page has a question. Again, you'll notice that the name of my activity is up here, the ending of the date. And here's a question that please indicate whether the olive oil citizen science taste test occurred as discrete events on specific dates or not. And this is a radio button. I can only say yes or no. There's no choices. In this case, I'm going to say yes. And my answer is going to change the next page. So let me answer yes, show you what happens for the next couple pages, and then we're going to jump back, choose no, and you'll see how it differs. Okay, so yes, this activity occurred as discrete events on specific dates. What dates? And I list them here in the text box. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Now let's go back to the previous page. If it didn't happen on, if it wasn't a set of discrete events that happened on specific dates, that next question wouldn't make sense. So if I say no, that question isn't even asked. That's what display or skip logic is about. Okay, so it's designed so that you don't have to deal with ambiguous questions that are not relevant based on previous answers. That's a pretty straightforward activity. Most of the stuff in this survey is about that level of complexity. So we can see the same thing here. Whether the olive oil citizen science taste test took place at physical locations and was a citizen science activity. Some of the activities that the community has worked on are purely virtual, and some actually have a combination of both. So if we have a combination of both, where are my physical locations? If it was a virtual activity that targeted a specific area, where did it target? If we change that the answer from the previous page so that it was a purely virtual activity, we're not asked about where it took place. Pretty straightforward. Okay, this next question about participation. There was a lot of ambiguity in the previous survey about how this wording was phrased, so we've tried to clarify this. At this point, I think you pretty much get an idea of what a survey looks like. I'm sure that you have filled out similar kinds of surveys for numerous other purposes. So basically, after this, I would like to get to the end of the survey, which will take me a few seconds to flip through a whole lot of pages. But as I do that, this is another opportunity to ask some questions. So I'm going to pass it off to Gif. And Gif, are there any questions in the chat room?
Yeah, there are about 10. So this is definitely a good time for a little bit of Q&A addressing. So there's a lot of great ones. I'll just go in the order that they came. I'll read them out loud. We'll see how we move forward with them. How has the survey been updated to overlap the project information required in the CitizenScience.gov catalog? And there was then a potential solution offered also in the chat box about perhaps adding a question that asks if the project is currently in the catalog, yes, no, and if the answer is no, the person filling out the survey can select whether they would want it to be included in the catalog. There's a question, so just as a recommendation, questions should probably go to everyone, just so that folks can see it, because they're all just coming to me, which is great. I love this. It's like being on a call line. So, and to clarify,
so Gif, you're fading out a little bit. Hopefully, in and out a little bit.
Is this better now?
Yeah, give it a try.
Okay. So basically, so that was one of the solutions offered in the chat window. And then a follow-up question was asked, can you please clarify which projects this is being sent out to? Will all the projects in the CitizenScience.gov catalog. So what we did was we grabbed basically the project listed in the CitizenScience.gov website, as well as the previous report that had not completed at the end of the FY18 period. So those are the projects that it's going out to. So yes, and so if we can add a question, because maybe this was like passed along and they received a URL because they realized they weren't part of the catalog, maybe we can add that question that was recommended in the chat box. What about new projects that were not in the last report? Do we need to send a list to us so that we can generate links for data entry? Yes, that would be very helpful, because if they weren't in the report or they're not listed in CitizenScience.gov, then we don't know that they exist. What else? Do CCS activity leaders get a specific link that is specific to each CCS activity? Or is there a link that the entire agency gets that allows for multiple activities to be put in for the entire agency? Basically, you could think of the URLs as being one-to-one to an activity. So each activity will get its own URL. There may be, and so hopefully there's one POC for that activity. As Tom mentioned earlier, there may be multiple activities that that person is a point of contact for. That works, because as you're seeing in this survey, the survey will indicate which activity that survey is for. let's see, what else? Is it possible to request that the survey only go to agency coordinators? And then a follow-on question came up saying perhaps it would be better to have all of that information go to the coordinators. And so a challenge is, as folks understand, this community is very diverse in how their specific agencies choose to manage these activities. And so it would be, we went with an action that would be likely suitable for everyone. And then of course, as the larger agencies that are responsible for many more activities have indicated already in some of the early emails that we received, some of those agency leads and coordinators are requesting those links directly. So it would be helpful to just continue to have that occur, because not everyone will want that. Not every agency rather even has an agency lead or coordinator. They may not have just enough activities to go. I realize that I may be missing some in the chat box, but I'm trying to get some. What if you have more than one sponsoring agency? Tom actually is right there sitting on that page. So I don't want to steal his thunder, but basically that's great. And there's a way to indicate that you have multiple partners. A question about the level of analysis, whether it will be analyzed at the department level, agency level, or both. And definitely we are working to collect data that allows us to do that. There was a suggestion in the previous webinar of perhaps moving that POC and contact information, sort of like in that first section of the survey, up higher so that an agency lead or coordinator can more easily identify who the survey was sent to. And we'll certainly work to try and incorporate that in. And then there was a suggestion of conversing about how the links are being distributed and what role, if any, agency coordinators have in the process. So the links are distributed right now. The default is to every point of contact or POC. But as I've mentioned, and as some of the questions have pointed me towards, there may be agencies that are requesting to have those links sent to the agency coordinator. So they obviously have an outsized role if that's what they've requested to do. And then further, every agency, I'm presuming, has a clearance and review process that will incorporate the agency coordinator. So those agency leads and coordinators will be very heavily involved in the review and clearance process to ensure that the responses are in line with what the agency is hoping to do in reporting out their CCS activities. I think I'm getting everything. Let's see, what else? I'm going to answer maybe two more. I know there's still a few more in the queue, but then I'll turn to Tom. Let's see. So actually, I got that one. Is this form changeable? There are some thoughts about how to streamline. So I think we will definitely catalog those thoughts. We'll definitely catalog those thoughts, and it looks like I may have to call in because my audio is going in and out. So I'll turn it over to Tom, and I'll try and get back on a more solid platform.
All right, thanks, Gif. So with respect to the question about projects that may have involved multiple agencies, there should be one lead agency designated, and only that agency should submit the survey information with respect to the activity, describing the activity. However, at this point in the survey, you should see a page that again mentions the olive oil citizen science taste test, and it asks how many partners, if any, you had. You can have 0 partners, you can do it all yourself, but you may have had a variety of partners. These could be other federal agencies, they could be private sector, they could be nonprofits, they could be academic institutions. This is your opportunity to make sure that those partners and their contributions are acknowledged. And the reason I've stopped here is this is another example of that display and skip logic. In this case, for the olive oil citizen science taste test, I've indicated there are two partners. If I go to the next page, I'm asked for the names of those two partners. And then on the subsequent page, I'm asked information specifically tied to those two partners. The nature of the partner, including another federal agency or office, a state or local government, and exactly the kinds of things that they contributed. We've tried to come up with kinds of very common things that partners contribute, but there is also room for other if you fill this out. So you'll be able to provide any other information. Now let me jump back a couple pages. Now you'll notice that just as there's a next page, I can go backwards and forwards in the survey. I cannot go directly to a page. I can only go page by page, backwards and forwards. So let me go back to, let's say I put in a third partner. Now this page asks me about the name of my third partner. Gifford's Awesome Farm. That's my third partner. And now I'm asked about that question here. So the survey is adapting to your answers. Again, trying to avoid the hassle of asking you questions that don't make sense because they aren't relevant to your project. I'm not going to guarantee that we got all of that worked out, but hopefully it'll be as smooth and straightforward as possible. Now, towards the end of the survey, you'll notice that I am about, I don't know, 80–85% done. There are a handful of questions that are particularly timely at this time. You will be asked this question. Please indicate whether the crowdsourcing and citizen science activity was designed and implemented in response to a national health crisis or emergency. If so, you will be asked whether this was part of a larger coordinated effort, and you will also be asked to describe the nature of the effort. So we are living in the age of COVID-19. It is, I think it's very possible that many agencies have taken on crowdsourcing or citizen science approaches in response to educational challenges, public health challenges, economic challenges that we're currently facing. And OSTP is very definitely interested in knowing whether the crowdsourcing and citizen science and prizes and competitions have been deployed to help address the current situation. So when you see these questions, that's an indicator that you're pretty much getting close to the end. I'm going to jump a couple more questions here. Eventually, you will reach this page. There's no question on this page. It simply says that this is the end of the survey. When you click next page, you're going to be shown a summary of all the answers to all the questions that you answered. It will not display, so I'm just going to hit next page. This is what you'll see. Quite literally, everything as you answered it. The important things to point out. There is a clickable link here at the top of the page that says download PDF. If I download the PDF, I just hit that button. It's downloading. I will get to that in just a second. There it is, my response summary. I'm going to save that. I'll open it in a second to show you what it looks like. But so you can check all of your answers online, or you'll have the PDF as an option. That is a document that can be circulated. All right, at the bottom of this, you will see that same blurb. This is the end of the survey. By clicking submit, below you will have you'll be uploading. Actually, we need to make sure that's straightened out. The PDF looks like this. It's crude, but it is effective and it is complete. So you will be able to share everything that you've entered, all the information, whoever you need to, collaborators, leadership. This will provide you with a hard copy record of exactly what you entered. Okay. When you hit, so you notice that at this point on this page, the last button doesn't say next page anymore. It says submit. This is the submit button. When you hit the submit button, you will no longer be able to edit anything in the survey. Until you hit that, you can use the previous page button to go backwards and change anything that you need to, for whatever reason, you realize that you entered something by mistake. Leadership has asked you to rephrase something. Until you hit the submit button, you can keep on working on this thing. Once you hit the submit button, you will have to contact us at citizenscience@ida.org in order to be able to make any further adjustments. And I think that's pretty much everything that I wanted to cover. I think it should give you as complete as an overview of what to expect through this new process, what information will be required of you, the way that the web survey will work to collect that information, and things to watch out for, both helpful things like the progress button and things to be careful of. Don't hit submit until you're 100% ready to commit. And that's pretty much it. Gif, are you back on?
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
All right, I am back on. Thanks, Tom. Obviously, don't go too far because there are a lot of really cool and interesting questions. Let's see. It looks like Sophia put in a great point in. So, but some of the questions that came in while you were speaking, what is question 14 regarding the discrete events on specific dates trying to get at? I think there was some interest within the community of just identifying like when the activity occurred, whether it was for the entire period or was it being planned for discrete events. Again,
so let me give an example. So the crowdsourcing community science and citizen science is, as we discovered when we put the report together last year, extremely diverse. So some of these things are long-term rolling, now online, continuously operating activities that anybody can participate in. Other citizen science and crowdsourcing events, for example, may be centered, rather than online, they may be centered, for example, at a national park, for example, or at a school, and they occur on those specific dates with a physical activity. It's possible to have online activities, bird count activities, for example, that only collect data for 10 days, 10 specific days. Before that, no one can enter data. After that, no one can enter data. So just keep in mind that some of the questions are oriented towards very different kinds of activities than what you may be experiencing and organizing. If you have any ambiguity about what is this question getting at, I have no idea. Well, one, we do maintain a FAQ and we are happy to share that. And if there's any question, just email us and we will provide you an answer as quickly as possible to get you moving.
Great, thanks. Couple more questions. Some of them are related to generating links for new projects. What information do you need to generate the link for new projects? And the person who asked the question offered the answer, which is correct. The name of the project or activity, and then the name, email, phone number of the POC. That is absolutely correct. That's the information that we need for the new project. We would like to know, of course, what agency, or it would be helpful to know what agency, but of course the survey itself answers that. So really, that's the minimum amount of information that we need to be able to generate a new link. the question, a related one, about if the agency coordinator would simply like to get all of the links to the project that they are responsible for, to whom should they make this request and by when? CitizenScience@ida.org. I suppose I cannot say that email address enough. Send a request to that email address by the end of the week, because as Tom had pointed out, our intent is to try and release survey links by early next week. Let's see, what else has come in? We also have regarding the location information, so going back to that question, understanding that it's very broad, and from experience, this person says that it's beneficial to have the information by city, state for consistency and mapping. While I totally agree with you, in looking at some of the previous activities, though, some were unable to get down to that final point. And so, unfortunately, we had to leave the location information text box broad because sometimes it does cover like an entire region. And so that is why we left it as such. How do those who serve as agency coordinators track from who in our agency is completing the survey and help encourage or support in submitting? That is a phenomenal question. And actually that is one of the reasons why we are looking to Qualtrics, because of course it can tell us, CIPI, who has gone in and opened their link and how far they've progressed. And so for us, we would be able to track that and then send specific reminders as in specific to that URL link. And again, I know that there are agencies, though, where they are managing so many projects that the lead or coordinator is tasked with coordinating all those projects. So they're requesting those URLs. And so then for us, we would ping the coordinator those reminders. And then I guess that could then spur the agency coordinator to ping their POC if they are, kind of going, having us go through them. But basically, I guess the most simplest way of saying that is we are tracking who's working on the survey, how far, and moving on that. Other questions include some that are just coming in now. It looks like there's one agency, well, I guess everyone could read this. NPS has about 116 BioBlitz projects in the catalog right now. Obviously, they're not current. Will all of those POCs receive a link next week? I don't want them to, and believe me, Tim, we don't want to send them links either. No, they will not. Basically, we were able to kind of do a course filter and sort of infer if a project had closed before the FY 17-18 time period, and so they will not be receiving a link. And again, for folks that are managing a lot of activities and have already reached out saying, hey, we want to be able to receive all the links you generate, that's a good way of making sure we send then generate the correct links, because we can't generate the links without that information. So if you want to generate links for 25 current projects, and likely we don't have that information because, as some had mentioned, they're not on the catalog or they weren't in the previous report, then we don't know about those 25. And so we would actually look forward to getting your email listing those 25 so that we can actually generate the links for them. What else? 3 more, and then I'll be done with the queue. So I apologize for you listening to my voice for so long. One person has found that over the years with their agency's projects, they're unable to provide quantitative budget estimates because they're built into larger efforts. So the question is, how would such projects handle the budget fields? We try and encourage best estimates, and that is something that, again, because the survey was written to try and address the most activities possible. Some activities can provide a more specific number and others cannot. And so we're just looking for a best estimate.
Keep in mind that, there are questions that are required, and there are also questions that if the question isn't indicated as required, then it's not required by definition, right? And so some of the budget questions are required, but some of the more specific ones also have some leeway, understanding that not everybody, the way that many of these activities are organized is folded into a larger pool, and parsing out the individual activity it's just not feasible. So there are opportunities to explain that, and there's keep in mind that we are aware of this as well, and we tried to set up questions that give people the flexibility to respond accordingly, right, in an appropriate manner for their activity.
Yeah, no, great additional clarification, Tom. There was a question here about, can we describe the agency level review process that Gifford mentioned in more detail? How can agency citizen science coordinators be involved in that process? As CIPI, I can't comment on any particular agency's review and clearance process. Obviously, that is something that is dependent upon your specific agency. But I would suggest that as coordinators, you should absolutely be involved in that process. As a POC, you would be sort of considered the direct supervisor of that POC, and so they should be reaching out to you, of course, and then you, of course, would be then reaching above you to continue on with that agency level review. So that's probably something that we can maybe discuss offline if you're saying a new coordinator or something, and also refer to the community. Folks in the community have probably done this for a while, and so they can maybe share how their agency conducts review and clearance processes. But that's a great question. Unfortunately, I can't, as CIPI, I can't answer that directly. So for existing projects from the 17-18 report, is there an option to check completed at the start so that there's no need to fill out the whole survey? Or should we send you an email to let you know that they are closed? That is a great question, and we'll definitely make it so that there is an easy way to indicate that even though it may have been listed as ongoing in the 17-18 report, in actuality, it should have been listed as completed so that we can save you some of this effort, of course. Let's see. Someone had noticed that some of the budget questions require numbers and wondering if there is either a certain limit. I believe we limited it so that you can't put a billion. But if your CCS project has $1 billion budget, by all means, email us and we will amend that limit because we don't want to shortchange anyone. But I think that's sort of the sort of formatting limit on that regard. Let's see.
I think I have a good 16 zeros there, GIF. It's like, I don't know if there's a limit.
I know.
The opposite, like I put in 12 or some small number and I didn't like it.
Oh, that'd try.
I think it might be the bottom limit then. But that's a good question too, and I apologize. I believe we may have put 100 as the bottom limit. Let's see, there was a question regarding question 38. Is this referring to equipment used, for example? And I think the short answer is yes, right? It's asking if there are other agency resources other than FTEs or funding. I don't want to overly prescribe how an agency might define other resources, but basically, as long as it's not an FTE or funding from that agency, and you know it, or the POC, the person filling this out, knows of it, then they could fill that question out. Okay, and then there's a question regarding question 46, and then questions 51 through 54, seeming more appropriate for an HQ level survey than for each individual survey. Is there a way to pull these out and only respond to them once for each agency? This is this is a comment that has certainly come up a number of times. The survey is meant though for the whole of the community. And so what we are hoping to do is we will try and amend 51 so that you can say unknown, because you're right, like if it is a larger agency and that POC doesn't know or, you know, can at least indicate that so they're not forced into a yes or no. And then you'll notice, of course, questions 52 to 54 will only display if they select yes. So again, if we can offer them the I don't know option, then they won't see the remaining questions. But those questions may be appropriate for, again, agencies that have only a few projects. And so they're sort of like, they're both the POC and the agency coordinator as a whole. And for 46, this is asking, like, which of the following practices your agency uses to support CCS activities. This is, again, where the agency coordinator can step in and ensure that there are agency-wide responses because they'll have access and they'll be part of that review and clearance process. Looks like some additional questions came up. Let's see. Does question 51 refer to a grantee or partner that is solely responsible for the project with no engagement from the agency? Refer to a grantee or partner that is solely responsible for the project.
The nature of the question suggests that that if a grantee or partner is running this activity entirely with no direct involvement of federal personnel or direct oversight or management or operation of the activity, then that activity should not be included. It goes back to that earlier question that this report specifically addresses crowdsourcing and citizen science activities that are run by agencies in whole or in part, and should not include activities that where federal involvement was purely to provide funding to a principal who designed and ran the activity.
Thanks, Tom. That is definitely some great clarification. And obviously, if Tom or myself are unable to answer questions here, sort of like live for the moment, we will definitely have an opportunity to answer them offline. Again, CitizenScience@ida.org, and hopefully we'll be able to provide better or more deeply thought out responses to those questions. There's another question that had come in regarding the frequency and location information, and more just to like provide context for the community who may be wondering like why are those questions there? These questions, of course, fill in to a report that goes to Congress. And I think the point that was made in the comment box that all of you have access to is right on, in that this report goes directly to two committees, one in the House, one in the Senate. But anyone on the Hill can look and pull from this report information that are going on, information about activities that are going on in their respective districts. And so sometimes that location information is helpful to know that for the office in case they may want to call it out in a speech, or if they happen to be, in town or in the district visiting on the weekend, that it could be something that they can like even visit, of course, unless it's like a discrete activity or online. So I think that's a great point that with the location information, it is helpful to be specific when possible so that you can facilitate congressional offices perhaps reaching out and connecting with this activity. And then There's a suggestion here about having questions 46, 51 to 54 for agency coordinators to complete. And so I think that makes sense for, again, some of the larger agencies where they have leads and coordinators to add on to our either auto-generated email if you want us to email them out, or if you're going to collect all the URLs, to certainly put that instruction in there to let the agency coordinators or leads answers question 51 to 54 and question 46. Absolutely great suggestion for the community. And again, just note though that POCs will not be able to progress if a question requires a response. And so you may just have to instruct them to put gibberish in there to allow them to finish the survey. Again, it depends on how you're working with your respective POCs on filling out the survey. Again, our recommendation is the POCs fill them out, and then through the clearance and review process, the agency coordinators can then assimilate those specific responses so that they align with agency priorities. And Tom, I think you had something to add.
Yeah, I was just going to reiterate two things. Although the links are shareable, they are clearly tied to a particular activity. The biggest danger for shareable links is that two or more people simultaneously are addressing questions and they end up overwriting each other's answers. We can't fix that. If that happens, that information is lost. So please, if you end up sharing or coordinating amongst multiple people, be very aware of who's working on what when, because it's always aggravating when you work hard on something and then it ends up getting lost and you have to redo it. But unfortunately, because of the way that this is set up, if that happens, there's no way to recover that. And keep in mind that I think Gifford's word gibberish was a good flag. We can only work with what you send us. So please, if you end up putting in, say, dummy text, the kind of lorem ipsum factum that I use to fill out this stuff, go back, double check. Because if we get something that's unprepared or raw, that's all that we have to work with. And unfortunately, that ends up reflecting in the final product for that activity. And we want to highlight these activities. We want to show their, how cool and awesome and how great these things are, and how exciting they are for the people running them and for the participants. So keep in mind that if you have to do that kind of thing just to manage the process at your end, make sure that there's a designated person to sweep through the final product before you hit submit and be absolutely sure that everything is exactly the way that you want it, because that's what people will see.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Tom, for, again, the additional clarification. A couple of questions that came up regarding the location question. One sort of pointing out it may not make sense to categorize as something purely online if a participant used an online questionnaire or mobile app, but they require those participants to be in a certain location. And so we'll definitely have a look at that to ensure that that location question allows for this specific possibility. We tried to make it such that you could answer in a way where maybe it's both. There's an online component, but an in-person component. But we'll definitely make sure that that flexibility is built in because there's someone who had said, yeah, there is a potentially a lot of complexity to the location question. And so I think amongst the community, that would be a great place to work towards a standard so that it would be very very easy to go then across the community to then begin to map some of these activities. And I think, let's see, there are a couple more that came in. I'm not sure if they're questions. Any projects that put in. So there's a question about many project leads that put projects in the, I guess it's the CitizenScience.gov catalog may not know that there are agency coordinators or how to contact them. And so the suggestion here is that a link to the coordinators page be included in the email in the survey. I may need to refer back to Sophia and the community regarding what that might look like to see if that is something that we could do in this report, or as indicated with another question earlier in the chat box, if that's something that we'll just have to maybe incorporate into the next biannual report data collection survey. But that's something that we can probably talk offline to Sophia and the rest of the community. That is definitely a great suggestion, and that's something that we'll capture for our own records. I know that the time also, it's we have 5 more minutes. I really appreciate all the folks that have hung on for this long. I actually am unsure if we've lost some folks or whatever. But we can certainly, again, remind folks that there's CitizenScience.gov is how to connect with the Stiffy team when they are working through some of these issues, and also help out with some of the survey questions that the community has. And then, as you all see in the chat box, but please, there's an opportunity to provide feedback to the Digital.gov group on this event. And so definitely click on that feedback link if you have a chance to help us improve overall how webinars are being presented, certainly in this very trying COVID times. And yeah, I think if there aren't any more questions, I certainly don't want to hold you here, but Tom and myself and obviously the Digital.gov hosts will stay on the line until 12:30. But if you have any more questions, feel free to pop them into the chat box. And as Sophia is pointing out, please join the FedCCS August meeting today at 2 p.m. You will have an opportunity, as she mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, to have an open discussion on this new data collection approach. And I'm sure she was going to say, but she's asked me to join for the first 30 minutes. And so I'll be there. I don't know if I'll be any more prepared with some of these very really hard and interesting questions, but I'll certainly be there to try and take some information back to the CIPI team. But yeah, thanks to everyone who stayed this long. And again, have a good rest of your day, and hopefully leading into a very good weekend.